Welcome to BONN PARK. I'm Sara Geidlinger.
And I'm Marshall Ward.
I'm Willow Gaudette. I'm here on behalf of SWAN of Waterloo Region, the Sex Workers Action Network.
Welcome to BONN PARK.
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 We've got big news.
Do we ever? We have a brand new website.
And so many amazing things to check out on it.
BONNPARK.com.
What can we find there?
You can listen to our episodes right on the site.
You can check out the BONN PARK community blog.
You can find out how you can partner with us.
Oh, and the shopping. We have so much fun merchandise.
I'm going to buy myself the I'm the Marshall Ward tote.
Me too.
BONNPARK.com. Check us out.
I keep getting lost in just all of the little things.
It's good things for you to look at. I
love David Sedaris. I love
David Sedaris, right?
Yeah, so good.
Oh my gosh. Just after my heart. The first time I read Me Talk Pretty one day, I hooked for like, I don't care what he does.
Yeah.
I will read every
He's
little
brilliant.
bit of it.
And his even just hearing him talk in interviews and everything, he's so delightful. I would kill to have a coffee with him.
Oh, no kidding. He was doing a book reading and signing in like Detroit right before the pandemic hit, and I was planning to go with my friend who lives in Windsor, but then of course it all fell apart. But we were really looking forward to that, just to be in the presence, and because most of his great stuff comes like off the cuff.
Yeah,
because he's just constantly
so
in that
quick.
mode. That whole family, they're so fucked up.
So fucked
but it
up
makes
and
them
so
funny.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh my God, I love it. Sedaris forever. Willow, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to talk to you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited too.
I first heard about SWAN via Instagram, whatever network I was, and it might have been something like Inside Waterloo, or somebody had reposted something. And I thought, oh, what is this? I've never heard of this before. And I started digging, with my quote unquote internet research skills. I have to put that in quotations because we all know what that means these days, that we think we're researching, but we're just Googling stuff. So SWAN Waterloo is the Sex Workers Action Network of Waterloo Region. And as soon as I saw this, my interest was piqued right away. I'll tell you a quick little story. When I first got into podcasts, I'm going to say maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I started listening to Bill Burr or NPR Tiny Desks. My favorite podcast of all time was Song Exploder. That's a great one. Everyone should check out. But through a coworker, I found this podcast called Guys We Fucked. Have you ever heard of this podcast?
No, I haven't.
It's not what it sounds like, but it's with Corinne Fisher and Christina Hutchinson. And this was a game changer podcast in terms of my personal education about sex work, and sex workers. There was a whole world open up to me of ideas that I didn't have before. And the main takeaway that I had from listening to this show was sex work is work, right?
Right.
Which was a new concept for me, right? In my little Waterloo bubble, living in my little life, right? So one of the things that actually came up on this show was one of the co-hosts had gone through a messy breakup and hired a sex worker to explore the importance of touch. Right? Just hadn't been touched in so long in any way. So hired someone to explore, that the importance of skin on skin contact, of having somebody else in your personal space, of having some intimacy. But what I really want to talk about is for SWAN, there's a huge umbrella of ideas and action items that you're trying to take on.
Yeah, so SWAN is just a grassroots organization. It's sex worker led, but it's comprised of both sex worker and non-sex worker ally members. And basically it's just a way of providing peer support and networking within the sex worker community, trying to bring together the sex worker community in the region, linking people to resources. We've just started a mutual aid fund, so we're really excited about that, to be able to help when sex workers face financial emergencies. We often, as sex workers, don't have a safety net if we have unexpected illnesses or injuries or anything like that. So mutual aid is really important. And we have a drop-in program that we run twice a month on the second and fourth Thursday of the month for sex workers. And it's run by sex workers. So it's only sex workers. And again, it's just like a hangout for sex workers.
Somewhere where you can relate to people who are facing the same challenges in what is a workplace.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So SWAN conducts 3 primary activities. I'm reading this directly off of website copy. It's a collaborative group for individuals, agencies, and groups working on issues pertaining to sex work in the Waterloo Region. Yeah. You work to create sustainable initiatives that utilize existing community resources and addresses needs in sex work. Basically what you're saying, but off of the website, and support members to undertake education, advocacy, and action. And this is why I say this is a big job, right? It's something that the province should be doing, but is not.
Right. And there's sex worker orgs all around the country. In fact, I don't know if you've paid any attention to the recent court challenge in the Supreme Court. So there's currently a legal challenge that's happening, and it was 25 sex worker organizations across the country and then 6 individual sex workers who as a coalition were challenging the courts about the PCEPA, which is the law that was put into effect, I believe, in 2010 by the Conservative government at the time, the Harper government. From the moment it was implemented, it was challenged by sex workers because it does make our work more dangerous. And so that challenge is currently happening with a coalition of groups from across the country. So there are sex worker orgs all around the country and all around the province. We do work with other sex worker orgs, and we're involved in collectives with other organizations. But yeah, it's an industry that doesn't get a lot of outside support. So all of the support sort of comes from within. We really network and support each other.
And like any good grassroots organization, it falls upon you to challenge legislature to make your life safer.
Right.
Under a government that's supposed to protect you in the first place.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no big deal or anything.
Well, so how do you get something like SWAN off the ground?
Actually wasn't originally created as a group of sex workers. I think it was created in conjunction with sex workers, but it was actually created more by some social work agencies. So it actually kind of had a different focus at the time. And the focus was a lot more with an older sort of outdated view that people in the industry are all exploited.
Right. Like, how do we get people to stop doing this instead of how do we support people through this work? Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now it's more sex worker led, and it's.
Well, I think it must be about persevering and like kind of in the face of constant frustration with antiquated ideas that are just not going to go away for a long time, right? There's people who bring their own biases and their own feelings.
The stigma is very real, and it's huge, and it's pervasive, and it's everywhere. And, I'm actually pretty rare as a sex worker who's willing to be face out and open about who I am and what I do and speak under my real name and all of that, because the stigma is very real. But it is shifting. And like you said, you actually, from listening to that other podcast, your perception shifted, and really it's exposure that shifts people's perspectives, because they have, around sex in general, people have very emotional responses.
Sure.
And then within a patriarchy, obviously there's going to be all of those issues with female sexuality and the underlying misogyny that sort of underwrites the stigma against sex work and sex workers. But there's a lot of shift that's happening, and I think we definitely see it with social media, because there's more sex workers who are speaking openly about who they are and what they do. And once people see just that we're just everyday people and it's just what we do for a living and we deserve the same rights and safety as any other workers.
I find that even with media outlets like CP24, for example, they have the smallest, shortest, quickest segment on legislation and advocacy around sex work. And then that's done. Let's move past that.
Blip, we have to say this, so we're going to bye.
Yeah,
Right.
One picture of a courthouse, one picture of something.
People are so uncomfortable.
Yeah. And even the news outlets, you feel there's a sense of, awkwardness about it.
It is spotlight, it's from a outsider's point of view with a pitying narrative.
Right.
Is that do you know, I might not be saying
or the
well.
same stock footage of like a woman's legs. Like,
Yeah.
out at night. Like, I mean, it's the same.
This is not relatable.
No, a woman leaning into a car.
Yeah.
You know, like that's kind of it's the same imagery over and over. Like,
Right.
you know. Imagine if like every fire was treated like that, the same fireman with a hose.
Right.
Right.
Where when that happens, we're looking for, people are showing new footage. Here's the
Yeah.
actual fire. Here are the people running from the building. Like, where is that type of stuff in the media? And it's true what you said, like me listening to this one podcast that shifted my perspective. If this stuff isn't in the media, like with everything else, that's how you get to the people. That's how you get the word out about things. I want to talk quickly about your Twitter at Aubrey Pesky, which is that Pesky Willow is your username. There is such an intimate and wonderful sense of humor mixed with reality and like clap back on your Twitter. And I'm instantly a fan. You're like, here's the work I'm doing. Here's the joke I'm going to make today. And no, actually, sir, I don't need your opinion, but thanks anyway. But it's chock full of good information where you're just out there saying, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. And, it's not just one angle where you're talking legislature or one where you're talking about your personal life, but everyone at the same time mixed with humor. So I'm forever a fan now.
Great. Thank you.
Is this something you grow into as an adult? Or what I mean, sometimes is this something like in high school you noticed there was a strength and an advocacy in you that wanted to speak out about things?
I've always been social justice minded, I guess is how you would say that. But not like the sex worker advocacy is really more recent for me, I guess, in the last few years. Prior to that, I was involved in the industry, but very quietly, very secretly. So.
What's that shift? Just knowing, like, wait a minute, there needs to be a change here, or sick and tired, or fed up, or what is it?
It's been a long, slow, gradual shift. So, like when I first started on Twitter, I had an old account, and I sort of it actually came about because I just wanted to be able to make jokes about the work that I was doing without having to constantly provide the context of I'm a sex worker for this joke that I'm
therefore,
making.
This is funny.
So, so I just kind of rebranded my Twitter account to actually show that I'm a sex worker, but it was never like a business account, so it's just a personal Twitter. But in doing so, I just kind of realized that like I really was getting a lot of good positive feedback from people online, and people were just really accepting and really seemed to enjoy my content, and I got a lot of validation and enjoyment out of that. And I think it gave me a lot of sort of optimism, just that it was received well by people online, or people that I would become friends with online. They were able to just accept it as a part of me, like anything else. And that actually gave me more courage to be forthright with people in my real life.
I relate to this because the podcast has done that for me.
Yeah,
we've been doing this for 3
great.
years, and it has really helped me find my voice.
I think everybody can relate to the idea of just being able to embrace like your authentic self and actually present your authentic self to the world, and how amazingly freeing and wonderful that is, and inspiring to other people. Mm-hmm. People do get inspired by that too. But yeah, and then also my children just reached an age where I felt more comfortable talking to them about it. They were kind of the piece that had held me back from being really open, especially on a more local level, because I was doing things online and I was doing podcast interviews, but I was doing all of that under my work name. And then, as everybody in my life that was important to me knew what I did, I just felt more free to be more vocal locally. And as I got involved with SWAN, I started doing more public facing events. So we've done booths at festivals like the Multicultural Festival and the Pride Festival and things like that. So I was speaking with local community members as a sex worker. And then more recently, I did a a speech at Take Back the Night under my real name. So yeah, and then now this. So
there's something very, very freeing to say, this is my name, this is what I do.
Right.
Take it or leave it. Like I'm going to present myself out there to the world.
Well, and the thing is that I realized that any shame that I had in being a sex worker was just external shame that I had internalized.
Yeah. Somebody else's shit.
And once I dropped that, I was like, you know what? I like what I do. I don't feel shame in what I do. I'm proud of the work that I do. And, so why should I keep it a secret?
And why not advocate?
And it's really great because there's a lot of people that don't have some of the privileges that I have to be able to be in a position to do that. And certainly people who have more marginalizations than I do, it's even more dangerous for them to be face out and name out. So me doing so, I think, is good, just because there's a lot of people who can't, and the more of us that can, it actually helps shift the tides a bit so that maybe in the future more of us can, and one day all of us can. Would be the goal.
There's so much that happens when you're a kid, especially a kid of the 70s and 80s like I was. There's entire sitcom episodes based around one of the main characters doesn't know that somebody's a sex worker. And that's the whole story's built around that. It takes years to learn and educate and re-educate yourself.
And it's a joke.
It's a joke.
Yeah.
It's always the joke. Some sitcoms. But so there's that. But I also think about how something like a drop-in space must be a very carefully crafted environment. What kind of things are considered when you think about a drop-in space to make people feel very safe and welcomed?
Well, it's just important for us that the drop-in itself is only sex workers in attendance. But really, it's just about, I think just being around other sex workers, you drop any sort of defensiveness that you might have about it, and you're able to speak freely and complain freely too. I think that, because even as I speak freely about things, I do think about when I'm speaking about my work, what messaging that might convey to people that are just taking that one piece, right? So I love my job, I love my work, but like anybody in any job, whether you love it or not, there's always going to be tedious aspects or bad days or things like that. So I am kind of a little careful in how I complain about my work or things like that. But so there's just a lot of freedom in being around other sex workers, but there's also it's such an isolating industry. The majority of us are working independently. And there is more networking that you see now online with social media and stuff. But in general, like before I started connecting with SWAN, I didn't know a single other sex worker locally. Mm-hmm. And the only other sex workers I knew were online. So just being able to connect with other people who are dealing with the same market that you are, and sometimes the same clientele.
And finding that community of people that you can lean on, that is made up of the same like-minded individuals who you can share those complaints with or those wins with.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Since you were talking about sharing clients, can I talk about, or can you tell us about the bad date list, which I found on the SWAN website?
The bad date list is essentially just a blacklist for sex workers in the area. Access is granted by request just to sex workers so that they can share info about any bad experiences that they have, and also just do some checking and screening.
In the interest of safety and well-being.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to take a moment to hear from this episode's sponsor.
Ever wondered what happens inside a black hole?
Or what quantum mechanics tells us about reality?
Curious about how the universe began or how it will end?
Feed your curiosity with Conversations at the Perimeter, a science podcast from Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics.
On each episode, we chat with a different scientist about the grandest questions in the universe, from the quantum to the cosmos.
Geek out to Conversations at the Perimeter, wherever you get your podcasts.
And now back to the show. I learned about sex work being work, but also as a tool to experience touch when you're desperately lonely. And one of our friends, actually, Marshall and I were having a conversation with somebody recently who said, if my partner ever died, I don't think I'd partner again. I think I would maybe hire someone just to experience some intimacy and have some touch. And we sort of had to process that and be like, wow, what an interesting view that is. Something we haven't considered yet, or thought about or had to think about. Your skin is the largest organ in your body. There's lots of research about why skin to skin contact is important from the time you're a baby to, the day you die. And I was talking to another friend that said, I would ask this guest of yours, do you ever get hired, or do you ever do work that is specifically to help someone through fear of touch, maybe, or, maybe they're not getting touch in their life in other ways. So I guess I just want to explore this idea.
Definitely. There's a lot of people, and not just with the touch aspect, there are people who are inexperienced and want to gain some experience to make them feel more comfortable so that when they're with somebody that they have an interest in pursuing a relationship with, that they don't feel so anxious about it. But also a lot of people that just have social anxieties, people on the autism spectrum. I personally have a lot of clients who have identified themselves as falling on the autism spectrum. And a lot of times for them, it's a way of, it's like low stakes for them to sort of work through any anxieties or awkwardness that they feel around that kind of intimacy.
Without investing in the weight of what is my responsibility with this other human here, right?
There's no real emotional investment at stake, right? Because everybody knows what the terms are. Yeah. It's transactional, but then within that, it can be a very intimate thing, just like going to see a massage therapist, right? That's a very intimate service that's being provided that involves touching, and it's a transactional experience at the same time. So yeah, I've had a lot of clients who have lost their spouses or who are recently divorced and just aren't feeling emotionally or mentally ready to tackle dating, but want physical and emotional intimacy. So being able to hire a sex worker and spend that time, there's physical touch, which is so important. You get that oxytocin.
Exactly what it is, yeah.
All that good stuff. But also a lot of the times, it's even just talking to somebody in that intimate way. It's going beyond the small talk. And I found a lot of clients really do open up a lot. I think that once you remove all of those barriers that proper society puts up, all the interactions that we have with other service providers are usually very superficial. They're usually very, how are you? I'm good. How are you?
All lies.
All lies.
They're all lies.
It's all masking. It's
nice
all masking.
Weather. Is it? I don't care. It's
right.
just, masking.
But once you've taken your clothes off with somebody, there's no room left really for a lot of masking.
That's not the time to talk about the weather.
A lot of people become very vulnerable, and they will open up a little bit emotionally. And some clients, if you have repeat clientele, then sometimes you do develop a good rapport and relationship with them. So, and they do want to talk about their lives or things like that. So yeah, they're different. People people seek sex work services often for different reasons, and the same client might even seek it at different times for different reasons. You know, sometimes it really is just about getting off, and sometimes it's a lot more than that.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we at with politicians and talking to politicians about support and places you can go? Like I like hearing that you're at the Multicultural Festival and the Pride Festival. You know, that's a really good start, right?
Yeah. That was really great doing those festivals. And actually at both festivals, local politicians did come over and speak to us at our booth. Actually really excited to see that Colleen James just got elected to regional council, because she has been so friendly to SWAN every time that we've been at an event. She's always made a point of coming over and talking to us, and we're really all keen on her. So very pleased about that. But local politicians have all been fairly friendly to SWAN on a federal level. Most of the political parties have done a lot of empty promises when it comes to actually repealing the sex work laws that are currently on the table. And that's why it took this legal challenge, because the Liberal government actually did campaign saying that they would work to repeal that if they got into power. And then, of course, once they got into power, that never happened. So the NDP, I would say, is the only party that's actually shown more of a willingness to actually listen and talk to sex workers and get be advised by sex workers about sex work law. And then even other organizations. So the Women's Legal Education and Action Fund has come out in support of the sex workers challenging of the sex work laws as it stands, because they actually previously refused to support the idea of changing the laws or repealing the laws. And then they did a complete about face, and they actually educated themselves. And they actually spoke to and listened to sex worker organizations, and they realized that to protect women, to support women, then sex work needs to be decriminalized. And I mean, even Amnesty International, they did studies to look at what reduces human trafficking, what makes sex work actually safer, and they all abundantly promote full decriminalization of sex work.
It seems so out of touch and old-fashioned that this is not decriminalized yet.
It's not based on anything. The laws as they stand were proposed to reduce the demand for sex work by criminalizing the clients.
Never going to happen.
It's never going to happen. It can't
History
happen.
repeat. It's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen. And all that it's done is continued to make. So even though sex workers are not criminalized, we're participating in a criminal activity. And the laws around all of the things that we do in order to run our businesses and screen our clients and advertise our businesses make it very difficult for us to do that and do so safely. And especially for the more vulnerable, like street-based workers, the laws really make it difficult for them to take the time to determine who's a safe client, what's a safe car to get into, that kind of thing. It directly impacts the safety of sex workers on a daily basis and has led to sex worker deaths. So it's an important issue. It's a very important issue to look at, and certainly reducing human trafficking is an important issue to look at. But having any criminalization of sex work does not reduce human trafficking. It does not make sex workers safer. It just doesn't.
And it's a myth that they're directly related.
Well, I mean, it's an industry that has human trafficking happening within it, but there's other industries that have human trafficking happening within them. And it's the only industry where we try and criminalize the industry as a whole in order to reduce trafficking within it. It doesn't make sense. And you don't need to criminalize sex work in order to criminalize trafficking. Trafficking will always be
a bad thing,
a criminal activity. You cannot traffic humans legally, nor should you. So, but yeah, it just drives traffickers and trafficking victims further underground. It makes people more reticent to report suspicious things that they see as they're operating within the industry. So it doesn't reduce human trafficking. It doesn't help trafficking victims at all.
So it wasn't that long ago that Waterloo Regional Police would have a female officer pose as a sex worker in downtown Kitchener with officers around the corner somewhere waiting for a solicitation to happen. And then there's an arrest made, right, or charges. And has there been a paradigm shift with the Waterloo Regional Police over the years where that they've stopped that practice? Trapping. Yeah. And just kind of gone, okay, we're going to back off here.
Yeah. And what we've really seen, the police are still too involved in the industry, I would say, but they're not actively trying to arrest or prosecute clients, even though they are breaking the law by participating. They're not really doing that. They have shifted their focus to looking for trafficking that's happening. But that they still within that are able to be too involved in our lives and businesses as independent sex workers, to monitor for that. So with any power like that, there's going to be abuses of power that happen too. But no, I haven't heard of any stings that are happening like that.
It sounds very similar to like the knowledge base and the education that's only now coming to light with regards to police and mental health issues. You can't just send any officer into any situation, right? It sounds like there's been a bit of work done, but there's so much further to go, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. In terms of the police, like it would make sense if SWAN and the police Waterloo Region Police Services had a relationship where, maybe they could use the bad date list to cross-check some stuff to make sure people stay safe. Or no, I know this is no. I'm not saying do it, but I'm saying if in the perfect relationship, I understand this list is confidential and it's used for sex workers, bisex workers, etc. But if you were in a perfect world, if you were going to have a good relationship with police, it would be more of a partnership and collaboration to keep everyone safe.
I would just fundamentally disagree that in any perfect or ideal world there's any relationship between sex workers and the police.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Well, personally, I'm all for defunding the police and rerouting those funds to social services and things that actually reduce crime and don't further promote racist application of racist laws. But no, I just don't think that, if you look at the states, then the number one abuser of sex workers is police. The history of sex work and police is a terrible one. Full of abuses of power and also just a refusal to recognize sex workers' humanity, recognize sex worker victims as human victims. The police also are the institution itself has all of the flaws that our society has, right? So there is
just get
racism
paid really well for it.
and the sex work community is like disproportionately made up of people with a lot of marginalization in the community. So racialized people, indigenized people, disabled people, queer people, trans people, like they're all overrepresented in the sex worker community. These are not people who have had a relationship with the powers that be that makes them feel in any way safe or protected by police. I can tell you that on the blacklist right now, there is a police officer. There's no ideal world where the police are working with sex workers, because that involves a level of control and power that really opens the doors for abuse of power. And sex workers have been traditionally abused by that power.
Something I heard you say earlier was you used either the word freedom or freeing, right? I really like this idea that if you can, someone like you can put the work in, you're kind of paving a path that's better, safer, and more freeing to those who come in, and hopefully 5-10 years from now, you can really see the fruit of your labor.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would like to see happening. And I do see that happening even in the time when I first entered the industry, and I haven't been in the industry the entire time, but I'm 37 years old now, and I was 21 when I entered the industry. The shift and changes in public perception of sex work that I've seen in that amount of time is unreal. Even the fact that sex workers are being called sex workers by police, by media, by the community at large. That's a huge deal. That's a huge shift that we didn't see. And even now, like if I'm watching like a true crime show or something, I'm always a little delighted when they use the term sex worker instead of prostitute, because it's just a huge representation of that shift that's happened.
And language is so important.
Happening. Language is so important for sure. But yeah, and I see, you know, I was very naive and very, just very naive and didn't know anything about sex work when I first got into it. So I learned all of my lessons the hard way. And it's really nice to see some of the mentorship and the, just the networking that's happening now with the online world, and seeing it's really empowering sex workers as individuals to be able to connect with one another in those ways. And so, I am seeing a shift, and I think that we're going to continue to see that shift. And I find that very exciting, and definitely it's worth it to me if even one or two people feel more comfortable or within sharing what they do with the world, then that's great.
BONN PARK is made possible with the support of the Kitchener Public Library and the Kitchener-Waterloo Community Foundation.
Our show is produced by Sara Geidlinger
and Marshall Ward,
with audio engineering by Sara Geidlinger.
BONN PARK's original music is by Alan Lung. Harry, you still with us? We want to tell you about a fun project that we have. Are you ready?
Yeah.
We have another podcast called An Unscripted Spectacle, Wrestling with Wrestling. Here's Colin Hunter of Kayfabe News to tell you all about it.
Welcome to An Unscripted Spectacle, Wrestling with Wrestling. I'm Colin Hunter from Kayfabe News. Marshall is utterly obsessed with professional wrestling. Sara is utterly perplexed by professional wrestling. On each episode of An Unscripted Spectacle, Marshall and Sara talk with a different guest from the world of wrestling. Promoters, referees, journalists, and current and past stars of the Squared Circle to talk deeply about the strange magic of professional wrestling that has enchanted Marshall his whole life. Can they turn Sara into a fellow connoisseur of professional wrestling? She'll need some convincing.
I find out who Jimmy Corderas is. Who the heck are you?
Oh, well, that's a good question. For those who don't know, I spent the better part of over 2 decades working in WWF/WWE, mostly as a referee inside the ring.
I have the honor of meeting the magnificent Lufisto.
I heard that you were described as the first lady of hardcore. I've just recently found out what hardcore is.
Yeah, thanks to Madman Pondo.
When I've learned that I was going to be inducted, it was like, it is now my time to tell the story of women's wrestling. Because so many times I've heard, oh, this is the first time this happens in women's wrestling history. And I'm like, no.
I learned all about the storytelling and writing process from Tom Casiello.
Yeah, I was in soap operas for 14 years. I was at Young and the Restless last. That was from 2009 to 2011. And so I thought, I'll go in for the interview. I'll be honest with them. If I blow it, I blow it. Not the end of the world. And I was there for 6 years. And I rose up the ranks to managing lead writer. And it was the most insane time period of my entire life.
I got a new skincare regime from RJ City.
Checking out your hair, and I wish that mine looked like yours. You have beautiful locks.
Thank you. The secret, this isn't a plug, it feels like an endorsement, is aloe vera. I have it here. I put it on my skin. I put it in my hair. I use the gel. I put a couple drops of peppermint in.
I have a plant right there on my
Good.
fridge.
Cut it open, squeeze it out, and put it, honestly, wherever you want. It's good for you.
I find out that Colt Cabana is just famous enough that he can still buy groceries. And Tyson Kidd tells me all about the people's elbow. Who knew?
Tyson comes to a complete stop, then brings his leg over the guy like he's going to do a leg drop. But the leg like keeps circling past the guy, and then he drops an elbow on the guy.
Oh, and the elbow represents like all the people of the fans?
Like
he's been voted, he's going to drop this elbow?
Well, he started calling himself the people's champion, and then that move just became the people's elbow.
And then there's also, as you know, there's the people's strudel.
What? Yeah. I mean, there's the people's eyebrow. There's a lot of the people. Got a lot of people.
So check out an unscripted spectacle, Wrestling with Wrestling. Available anywhere you get your podcasts.